My sister tried to steal my boyfriend, but life had a different plan. So I guess I should start by introducing myself, right? Hi, I'm Ava, 25, living in New York City, juggling a career I actually love, a boyfriend who's basically perfect. Well, more on that later. And a younger sister who, until recently, I thought I could trust with my life. My life, by all external measures, was picture perfect. Seriously, if you'd told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here, sipping my overpriced coffee and recounting the start of a nightmare disguised as ordinary life, I'd have laughed in your face. But here we are. I met Ryan 3 years ago at a mutual friend's party. He was the kind of guy who made you feel like the world had just paused so he could smile at you properly. Tall, a little scruffy in a way that somehow worked, with these hazel eyes that, honestly, I could get lost in for hours. And he was funny, like, actually funny, not the awkward giggle at my own jokes kind of funny, but genuinely funny. From the first conversation, I knew he was different. We clicked instantly. The kind of connection you read about in cheesy rom-coms but never think actually happens to you. My career was going well too. I work in digital marketing for a startup that, against all odds, was actually thriving. I was one of those people who genuinely loved what they did. Emails, campaigns, meetings, social media strategy. I thrived on the chaos and creativity. Ryan, being the supportive boyfriend he was, never made me feel guilty about long hours or last-minute deadlines. Instead, he somehow managed to make even my busiest weeks feel like we were having adventures together. And then there's Evelyn, my little sister, 24, who, on paper, should have been my ride or die. She's gorgeous in a sort of effortlessly casual way, with that sly smile that can charm anyone in a 5-block radius. We were close growing up, too close maybe. I shared everything with her, from my first heartbreak to the trivial things like which lipstick I was obsessing over that week. I always thought she was my confidant, but somewhere along the line, the lines got blurred. At first, it was subtle. Evelyn's interest in Ryan started as cute little sister quirks, like asking way too many questions about him. "Does he text you back fast?" she'd ask, her tone all innocent. "Does he like pizza the way you do?" And I'd roll my eyes but laugh it off because, well, she's my sister and sometimes she could be a little nosy. Then came the small, weird incidents that should have raised red flags. Like the time I invited Ryan over for dinner and Evelyn suddenly appeared in my apartment with a spontaneous dessert she'd baked. Not just any dessert. It was the exact kind of chocolate cake Ryan had once mentioned, loving on a casual coffee date months ago. I laughed it off at first, assuming she remembered from some random conversation we'd had, but it felt odd. Or the time she offered to help me pick out a birthday gift for Ryan, and she spent over an hour going on about what she would want if she were in his shoes. I brushed it off as overenthusiasm. Sisters are weird, right? But looking back, it wasn't just enthusiasm, it was intense. I started noticing the way she lingered whenever Ryan and I were together. Too close for comfort, too interested in his jokes, his habits, even the way he drank coffee. It was subtle, but my gut was starting to scream that something was off. And honestly, I didn't want to see it. I wanted my sister and boyfriend to get along. It's what every girl dreams of. I didn't want to believe my little sister could harbor something darker. One Friday evening, everything started to feel different. I had a particularly rough day at work and Ryan invited me over to his apartment. We were lying on his couch, him playing some random playlist while I ranted about my boss, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Evelyn. "Be careful with him tonight. He's not what he seems." I laughed nervously, assuming it was some weird attempt at humor, but something about the wording didn't sit right. Ryan and I went out for a walk afterward, trying to shake off the tension of the week. The city was alive, the kind of vibrant chaos that makes you feel like anything can happen. And that's when I noticed Evelyn's presence again. Not physically, she wasn't following us, but in my mind, in the way she'd been popping up in my life more and more, often when I least expected. The weirdest part? That night, I was cleaning up after dinner at my place. Ryan had stayed over, and I heard voices outside my door. At first, I thought it was just the neighbors, but then I recognized them. Evelyn and Ryan. I froze, pretending to be washing dishes. The conversation was muffled, but I caught snippets. "She doesn't suspect anything yet. She trusts me completely. I know, but we have to be careful. I don't want to hurt her." And then a pause. My heart was hammering in my chest. Did Ryan just say that? Or was he saying something entirely different that my brain twisted into betrayal? "I just can't keep lying to her forever," one of them said. I wanted to burst through the door, demand answers, yell, cry, anything, but I didn't. I stayed put, pretending to scrub a stubborn pot as the voices faded away. My mind was spinning. Was this what I feared, or was I overreacting? I spent the next few days hyper-aware, noticing every glance, every lingering touch, every coincidental appearance Evelyn made when Ryan was around. Every time he hugged me or kissed me on the cheek, I found myself scanning Evelyn's expression like a hawk. And honestly, it was starting to eat me alive. By the end of that week, I realized one thing. My life, which had seemed perfect just a few months ago, had cracks in it I could no longer ignore. My boyfriend, the man I trusted, and my sister, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, were now a mystery I wasn't sure I was ready to solve. And that's where I left it for now. I needed to figure out what was really going on before I confronted anyone. But if I'm being honest, everything that once felt secure was suddenly unstable, and I had no idea which way this storm would blow. So, yeah, that's where I am, sitting here, trying to act normal while my world quietly spins out of control. And the worst part, I overheard something that night. Something that could either be nothing or everything. And I think deep down, I already knew. Life wasn't going to let me enjoy perfection for long. If you think the first hint of betrayal is bad, trust me. Nothing prepares you for the slow, creeping realization that the people you trust the most might be the ones undermining everything you love. That's exactly what happened to me. After overhearing that conversation between Evelyn and Ryan, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every moment I spent with either of them was under a microscope in my mind. I found myself analyzing tiny details that used to mean nothing. How Evelyn laughed a little too long at Ryan's jokes, how Ryan's attention seemed slightly divided, how text notifications made my stomach drop before I even checked the phone. I didn't want to see it, but denial only delays the inevitable. It started subtly, the way these things always do. Evelyn suddenly needed my help with projects at work. She'd show up at my office during lunch, claiming she wanted to help me meet deadlines. And Ryan, he seemed almost encouraging of it. "It's great she wants to help," he'd say, tossing a smile my way that should have been reassuring, but now felt like a calculated move I couldn't quite read. I remember one evening in particular. I'd been pulling a late shift at the office, completely drained, and Evelyn offered to pick Ryan and me up for dinner. I hesitated, but the exhaustion won, and I agreed. That ride should have been ordinary, mundane. But Evelyn had this way of steering the conversation, subtle, probing, almost hypnotic. She asked Ryan about his plans, his preferences, even the little things he mentioned liking in passing. I kept trying to interject, trying to redirect the conversation, but it was like she had some sixth sense for maneuvering around me. And then there were the texts. I'd glance at Ryan's phone when it buzzed, just out of curiosity. I know. Privacy and trust, blah blah. But there's a difference between noticing something and actively snooping. At first, I dismissed it. Work stuff, memes, usual casual chat, but patterns started emerging. Small compliments, emojis that didn't feel platonic, little good morning messages that weren't addressed to me. My chest tightened every time I saw them. I tried confronting Ryan directly. One Saturday morning, I found him in the kitchen, making coffee. I leaned against the counter, trying to sound casual, though my heart was racing. "Ryan, can we talk?" I asked. He looked up, concern flickering across his face. "Of course, babe. What's wrong?" I hesitated. How do you ask your boyfriend if he's secretly involved with your little sister without sounding insane? But I had to know. I noticed some things. With Evelyn and some of your messages, I just feel like something's off. Ryan's expression softened, and he reached for my hand. "Ava, nothing's going on. I swear, I don't know what's making you feel this way, but you're the only one I care about. Evelyn's, she's just being herself. Maybe over-friendly sometimes, but that's it." I nodded, trying to believe him. I wanted to believe him, but my gut screamed that something was wrong. The tension didn't dissipate. It grew. I started analyzing every gesture, every glance, every word. I wasn't paranoid. I hoped I was. So I turned to my friend Maddie. Maddie's the type who's sarcastic, blunt, and terrifyingly perceptive. She's the kind of person who doesn't sugarcoat anything. I spilled everything. My fears, my suspicions, the overheard conversation. I even admitted the text from Evelyn. Maddie didn't hesitate. "Ava, stop overthinking, but also, don't ignore your instincts. You need evidence. Don't confront anyone yet. Gather proof first. Snap screenshots, take notes, whatever it takes. Don't let your emotions make you do something you'll regret." I knew she was right. Though it didn't make the anxiety any easier. Every social media post, every casual interaction, every innocent hangout felt like part of some complicated chess game I hadn't signed up for. The worst part? Evelyn had mastered the art of subtlety. She didn't do anything overtly obvious, but her movements, her comments, the way she lingered around Ryan, it all carried intent. Like the night she insisted on helping Ryan assemble a new gaming setup at my apartment. She spent hours leaning over his shoulder, suggesting cable arrangements, placement tweaks, tiny, meaningless gestures to anyone else. But to me, they screamed intimacy. And then it happened. The moment that shattered my tenuous control over my emotions. I'd gone upstairs to grab a book, leaving Ryan in the living room while Evelyn checked some cables downstairs. I passed the open door to the den and froze. There they were, Evelyn, sitting close to Ryan on the couch. Ryan's hand rested lightly on the armrest just inches from hers, their shoulders nearly touching. They were laughing softly at something I couldn't hear, and Evelyn reached over, brushing a strand of hair from his face, not aggressively, not overtly, but enough that my stomach dropped like I'd swallowed a stone. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. I turned on my heel and left, heart hammering, head spinning. I didn't want a confrontation. Not yet. I needed to process, to plan, to figure out how far this went. But the image of them sitting there, so close, so natural, burned itself into my mind. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the scene over and over, analyzing every movement, every glance. Was it innocent? Was it something more? Ryan had reassured me, right? But could he have been lying or just blind to it? And Evelyn, my sister, My sister, who I had once trusted with my entire life, was suddenly someone I could no longer fully believe in. Over the next few days, I became hyper aware of their interactions. I watched as Evelyn lingered whenever Ryan came over, pretending to help me with errands or dishes. I noticed how Ryan's responses seemed distracted, though still affectionate enough to keep me from confronting him outright. It was a maddening balance, my mind telling me something was wrong, my heart desperately hoping I was overreacting. I decided Maddie was right. I needed evidence. I started documenting every interaction, every suspicious message, every lingering touch, every moment that made me uncomfortable. I didn't know how I'd use it yet, but having a record felt like taking back some control. Then came the worst night of all. I had gone out to grab a quick snack at a corner store, leaving Ryan and Evelyn at my apartment. I returned earlier than expected. Something told me to. And when I opened the door, there they were. Evelyn was on the couch again, leaning just a little too close to Ryan. Their heads were almost touching as they whispered about something, soft laughter spilling between them. And Ryan, my Ryan, was letting it happen. Not overtly, but the way he didn't move, the way he didn't push her away, it was enough. I didn't confront them. I couldn't. My throat felt tight, my chest was heavy, and my vision blurred with anger and hurt. I left again, quietly, carefully, closing the door behind me. I drove around the block for what felt like hours, just breathing, trying to make sense of the chaos my life had become. The betrayal wasn't fully confirmed. Not yet. But the signs were undeniable. Something was happening. And it wasn't just a misunderstanding. By the time I returned, I knew one thing. My life was changing. The people I loved most were no longer safe to trust. And I had to decide whether to act impulsively in my heartbreak or wait, plan, and gather the truth. That's where I was, caught between disbelief and suspicion, heartbreak and anger, love and betrayal. And the worst part? I didn't know how far this web had spun, or whether it would eventually entangle me completely. But one thing was certain. Everything I thought I knew about Ryan, Evelyn, and even myself was about to be tested in ways I couldn't yet imagine. I don't think anyone ever prepares you for the moment you have to confront someone you love, only to realize that the person you thought you knew may not even exist anymore. Or worse, that their intentions have always been slightly different than what you believed. And that's exactly where I found myself, one chilly Thursday evening in New York City. After the last week of near sleepless nights, replaying every moment, every glance, every tiny interaction between Evelyn and Ryan, I realized that avoiding the confrontation was no longer an option. My mind was a storm of confusion, anger, and heartbreak, and the worst part, every memory of my sister, the one I had trusted, laughed with, and confided in since childhood, was now laced with suspicion. I started planning carefully. This wasn't about yelling or accusations. I needed clarity. I needed truth. And most importantly, I needed a strategy to preserve my dignity. I couldn't let the situation spiral into something I regret. I spent hours thinking about how to approach Evelyn first, because honestly, if anyone deserved honesty, it was me. I invited Evelyn over to my apartment under the pretense of catching up and helping me organize my wardrobe. She showed up with her signature mischievous grin, completely oblivious or maybe intentionally unaware of the storm I was carrying inside. I offered her tea, sat across from her on the couch, and forced myself to smile. My hands were trembling slightly, but I kept my tone casual. Evelyn, I started, letting the silence stretch just long enough for her curiosity to peak. She tilted her head, the way she always does when she senses she's about to be interrogated but thinks it's playful. "Can we talk?" "Of course," she said, her voice too sweet. The kind of voice that hides more than it reveals. I took a deep breath. "I know what's been going on with you and Ryan." Her smile faltered for a split second, and just enough to confirm my suspicions that something had been off. She recovered quickly though and leaned back. "What do you mean?" I didn't flinch. "Don't play dumb. I've seen the way you're around him. I've heard conversations, noticed messages. This isn't just me imagining things. You're jealous of my relationship, Evelyn, and it's clear that your intentions have crossed a line." For a moment, she didn't speak, and then, almost sighing, she said, "You always see things in black and white, Ava. Not everything is as serious as you make it out to be." "That's where you're wrong," I said, voice steady despite the rising heat in my chest. "I'm not overreacting. I care about Ryan, and about you for that matter, but this betrayal, whether intentional or not, has to be addressed." She laughed softly, a little bitter, a little guilty. "Betrayal? Really?" I was confused. I admired him, yes. I felt overlooked, invisible sometimes. "You have this perfect life, Ava, and I wanted a piece of that happiness, I guess. Maybe I went too far." Her confession hit me like a punch to the gut. Part of me wanted to rage, to throw every accusation, every hurtful word at her, but another part of me, the part that had loved her since we were kids, remembered the times she defended me, the nights she stayed up with me after a breakup, the countless memories that made her family and friend, not enemy. And that made me hesitate. "You went too far," I said finally, voice low but firm. "And you need to understand that. Ryan is with me. He's my partner. And your jealousy, no matter how human, can't override that." Evelyn looked down at her hands, twirling a strand of hair. "I know. I see that now, but I couldn't help how I felt. I didn't want to hurt you, but sometimes feelings don't listen." I nodded, trying to absorb it all. Then I added, "I need honesty, Evelyn. Absolute honesty. Did anything happen between you and him? She met my gaze finally, eyes glossy, conflicted. No, nothing physical. I tried to be close and maybe I pushed the boundaries emotionally. But it never went beyond that. I wouldn't, not really. I exhaled slowly, relief mixing with lingering anger. The betrayal had been emotional, manipulative even, but it hadn't crossed the ultimate line. Still, the damage was done. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight, and now I had to decide what to do with this knowledge. Then came Ryan's turn. I didn't approach him immediately. I wanted to be composed, to have clarity before I asked for his side of the story. When I finally invited him to my apartment, I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. He was waiting, casual as ever, but I could see the tension in his posture. He knew why I wanted to talk. Ryan, I said, locking eyes with him, I need to hear the truth. From you. About Evelyn. He ran a hand through his hair, his usual confidence shaken. Ava, look, I made mistakes. I didn't set boundaries well with her. I didn't realize how close she was getting, and I should have told you sooner. I never acted on anything. I didn't reciprocate anything beyond friendliness, but I should have noticed sooner how it looked. I'm sorry, truly. Hearing him say that, the guilt and hurt in his voice softened the edges of my anger. But I was still careful. You didn't reciprocate? Are you sure? Because sometimes people don't even realize they're crossing a line until it's too late. I'm sure, he said, sincerity in his eyes. I care about you, Ava. That hasn't changed. I let the situation get complicated, yes. But I never betrayed you in the way you fear. I studied him for a long moment, trying to parse his words from his intentions. It wasn't easy. Ryan had always been composed, honest, a little teasing, but now he looked vulnerable. And vulnerability isn't something you fake easily. I knew then what I had to do. Confrontation wasn't just about uncovering the truth, it was about reclaiming myself. I needed to assert my boundaries, my space, my dignity. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity, closure, and a way forward that left me in control. So I set some ground rules. For Evelyn, it meant acknowledgement of her behavior and an understanding that some lines weren't to be crossed. For Ryan, it meant honesty, open communication, and conscious effort to rebuild the trust I thought was unshakable. And for myself, it meant paying attention to my instincts, valuing my emotions, and refusing to let manipulation, jealousy, or confusion dictate my life. After that confrontation, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and empowerment. The emotional roller coaster, the betrayal, anger, and hurt wasn't gone, but it was tangible now, named and acknowledged. The confusion of the past weeks had crystallized into clarity, and while that clarity hurt, it also gave me control. I spent the following days reflecting on the entire situation, revisiting memories of Evelyn and me growing up, of all the times we'd laughed, cried, and defended each other. Those memories reminded me that people are flawed, that love and jealousy are complicated, and that forgiveness doesn't mean weakness. It means understanding and choosing your battles wisely. And Ryan, he was conflicted, yes, but ultimately truthful. That didn't erase the hurt or the near betrayal, but it gave me a framework to work with. Trust, I realized, could be rebuilt, but only carefully, deliberately, and with boundaries clearly marked. By the end of the week, I had made my decisions. Evelyn would remain in my life, but the relationship would change. Closer emotional ties needed caution, and I had to monitor our interactions carefully. Ryan and I would continue together, but honesty and communication would become the cornerstone of our relationship. And me, I felt stronger, smarter, more aware. The confrontation had been painful, yes, but it had also been liberating. I had faced the truth, uncovered the intentions hidden beneath smiles and playful gestures, and reclaimed a piece of myself I hadn't realized was slipping away. That night, I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker like tiny stars across the skyline, and I allowed myself a small, victorious smile. Life had thrown me a betrayal I never anticipated, but I had navigated it without losing my core, without letting manipulation dictate my actions. I felt a sense of calm determination settle in my chest. I wasn't naive. I knew relationships, even sibling relationships, would always be complicated. I knew Ryan and Evelyn weren't perfect, and neither was I. But I also knew that when faced with betrayal, the best response isn't blind revenge or passive suffering. It's clarity, action, and protecting your own peace. And that's exactly what I intended to do. If someone had asked me a few months ago where I thought I'd be after everything with Evelyn and Ryan, I probably would have laughed, maybe nervously, maybe bitterly, and said, somewhere broken, wondering why life likes to mess with me. But here I am, sitting at my favorite corner cafe, the kind with the tiny succulents on the windowsill and baristas who know your order before you say a word. And honestly, life had a very different plan. After that confrontation with Evelyn and Ryan, things were tense, yes, but not hopeless. The first step was rebuilding myself, my identity beyond betrayal. I focused on my career like I'd never allowed myself to before. My startup was taking off, campaigns were landing, clients were happy, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the thrill of accomplishment instead of anxiety gnawing at my chest. I poured energy into every project, every creative idea, every pitch, and it was exhilarating. Work became a sanctuary, a place where I could be productive without constantly scanning the room for signs of deception. I also started leaning into my friendships more. Maddie, bless her brutally honest heart, became my anchor. Our girls' nights became sacred rituals: wine, sarcasm, board games, and endless rants about life's absurdities. I laughed harder than I had in months, and it reminded me that joy exists outside of romantic entanglements and family dramas. Ryan, meanwhile, had to earn my trust back, and I made that very clear. It wasn't about ultimatums or bitterness, it was about boundaries, honesty, and respect. And to his credit, he met the challenge with patience and sincerity. He listened more than he spoke, checked in without being overbearing, and made tangible efforts to rebuild what had frayed. Slowly, cautiously, trust began to stitch itself together again. There were setbacks, of course, moments when insecurity would creep in, but over time, our relationship evolved into something stronger, something more resilient. Evelyn's consequences, on the other hand, came in their own way. Life, in its poetic irony, tends to balance itself. She started noticing that doors she had taken for granted, friendships, social invitations, professional opportunities, weren't as open as before. People began to see patterns, to recognize her manipulations in subtle ways. There was no grand expose, no public humiliation, but quiet ripples that gradually reshaped her world. And I won't lie, I felt a mix of vindication and sympathy. She had to learn her lesson, just as I had to learn mine. Trust is fragile, and intentions, even well hidden, have a way of revealing themselves. Through it all, I grew stronger. My confidence didn't just return, it expanded. I discovered hobbies I'd neglected, from early morning runs along the river to cooking elaborate meals I never thought I'd attempt. I rekindled friendships I'd lost touch with and made new ones with people who brought authenticity into my life. Every step was a reminder that betrayal, while painful, doesn't define you. You do. And love found its way back into my life too. Not just in the form of Ryan, who had proven himself worthy of a second chance, but in unexpected moments. The barista who always greets me with a smile, the colleague who genuinely appreciates my ideas, the friend who shows up in ways you never expect. Love isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, persistent, and completely life-affirming. Ryan and I had our first official reset dinner a few weeks after everything had cooled down. It was casual, just the two of us, but it felt monumental. We laughed, we talked about mistakes without blame, and we dreamed again, carefully, thoughtfully, about a future together. The weight of past doubts lifted just enough to let us breathe again. I realized that reconciliation isn't about forgetting, it's about acknowledging the past, learning from it, and moving forward intentionally. Evelyn and I didn't magically become best friends again. The dynamic shifted irreversibly, but that didn't mean we couldn't coexist. Distance and boundaries became our tools, and with time, I found peace in that. I forgave, not for her, but for myself. Forgiveness doesn't erase hurt. It allows you to step forward without being shackled by someone else's choices. Life also threw me a few surprises along the way. Some small, some profound. A promotion at work, a weekend getaway I hadn't planned but needed desperately. Random acts of kindness from strangers that reminded me the world wasn't entirely cruel. Each moment reinforced the lesson I had learned the hard way. When life crumbles your illusions, it often rebuilds your foundation stronger than before. By the end of that summer, I was no longer the same Ava who had walked into that first confrontation, heart racing and tears threatening at every corner. I was someone who had navigated betrayal without losing her core, who had rebuilt trust carefully and deliberately, and who had discovered a resilience I hadn't known I possessed. I smiled more freely, spoke more honestly, and invested in relationships that were genuine, not performative. And as I sit here now, typing this out for anyone who's ever been blindsided by people they trusted, I want you to understand this. Betrayal hurts deeply, and it reshapes the way you see the world. But it also teaches you something invaluable. It teaches you to pay attention to your instincts, to set boundaries, to value yourself above the chaos others may create. It teaches you that life isn't about punishing the ones who hurt you. It's about reclaiming your narrative, your energy, and your joy. So yes, my sister tried to steal my boyfriend, and yes, my trust was shaken to its core. But life had a different plan. A plan that didn't involve me crumbling under heartbreak. A plan that demanded I rise stronger, wiser, and more in love with my own life than ever before. And that's exactly what I did. Alright, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the story. We have so many more amazing stories coming your way, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to reach 100K subscribers by the end of this year, and we'd love for you to be part of this journey. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.